righty. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's give maybe 30 seconds just to allow some latecomers on to join us. Okay. All right. We'll get started. First of all, good afternoon to everyone, and greetings from MPH for those of you who might not be right in the neighborhood right now. It's a beautiful day here in Syracuse or in DeWitt, and I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Dave McCusker. I'm the head of school. My role here is going to be quick and really easy because all I need to do is introduce our presenter, Dr. Shannon McGarry-Leggett. Before I do, though, I just want to mention that we're going to go for an hour. Shannon is going to present for probably 35 minutes or so. We received some questions in advance from folks who wanted to have Dr. McGarry-Leggett address some questions. And what I would encourage folks to do is to use the chat function if you have a question as we're going along that you'd like for us to address during the second part of the session. The session is also going to be recorded, just as an FYI, for those of us who are on the call or on this meeting. And we're doing that largely because we want to make good use of this presentation for our education here at MPH. And so we're going to be able to leverage up what's shared here today. So without further ado, again, this is easy for me. Dr. Shannon McGarry-Leggett, in addition to being the parent of MPH alums, has also been on our board for several years, and she's currently the vice president of our board of trustees. In fact, Shannon and I just got off of a call about 5 minutes ago. And so her service to this community has been longstanding and really appreciated. We did joke, however, that in the last 8 months, I don't think we realized how fortunate we were, and we are as a school, to have a leading epidemiologist on our board of trustees. And over the course of the last 8 months or so, Shannon has been just a tremendous resource to us when we have thorny questions that we just fall outside of our area of expertise, which is pretty much anything related to COVID-19, or at least certainly in the early days, weeks, and months. And so Shannon's just been a wonderful resource from a professional standpoint and as an expert. And she's also just an awesome person. She's just really nice.
Thanks, Dave.
Shannon, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you very, very much on behalf of our community.
We're happy to help out. So it seems like a lifetime ago since I did one of these in the spring. I can't even remember, Kelly or Jen, maybe it was April or May. I don't.
It was April.
It was April. That's like a whole lifetime ago, sort of like the old days in April. And so a lot has happened. Dave asked me, did you learn a lot? I feel like I've done a couple master's theses in the last few months, all in PowerPoint presentations, of course. But, Dave et al. Just asked me to just give you a general update and really think about what lies ahead. And I think a lot of the angst is associated with the uncertainty with what's going on. I mean, it's sort of like, I love to travel, and like all of my travel plans just fell off this cliff, and it's that uncertainty. And so I re-familiarized myself with the 1918 flu, and have read a number of books on it. And there's different accounts and whatever, but that one on average, I think everyone's kind of centering around 22 months. So I can't tell you when this is going to be over with. It's probably going to be over with sooner than 22 months, but maybe that's the outside. And so I don't know if that makes everybody feel a little bit better that, hey, maybe we're halfway through this. I think things seem so much more bearable when you know they're going to end. Like, you can endure a lot if you know when it's going to end. So, that's sort of maybe the high level thing. Maybe you can take some optimism away from that. But we've been preparing a lot of information for our clients, and so I'm just going to share some of this. Hopefully it's not too sciencey. If it gets too sciencey, just put something in the chat that says, I don't understand X, and we'll shore it up, because I don't want to leave anyone behind. Likewise, if I gloss over something that you're like, hey, what about XYZ? Just put it in the chat, and Dave is going to toss those to me when we get them. So, you know, I've got some of the major topics here. I could spend hours talking about any one of these, but I want to frame things up with the current situation, where we're at with sort of transmission, and what the you know, the current epi looks like. I'm going to talk through some of the hazard prevention and control that we sort of suggested early on that we knew was going to work, and I've got some evidence that it does work, right? So want to shore that back up for you. Walk you through some of the testing that's out there. It's crazy, you know, what to test, how often to test, what analysis is just huge. Again, could write another thesis on that right now. Certainly, I think everybody's chomping at the bit to hear a little bit about the vaccine and some thoughts on that. And then I'm going to finish up with some thoughts, and I'd love conversation around the holidays and travel and what it means about taking care of ourselves and taking care of our communities. I put this one together because I'm fatigued, right? So I have to read the scientific literature, right? Like I'm eating my vegetables every day. I'm reading the scientific literature. I have pretty much turned off the television set, in case anyone's wondering. I haven't watched the proper news in probably 6 or 7 months. I couldn't take it anymore. And maybe that was just because I was reading the scientific literature all day long. Forget social media. Like it gets, you react to it emotionally. I can't go there now. Spending a lot of time on the phone with local and state departments of health. And wow, everybody should thank a DOH worker in whatever state or county they're in. You know, again, talking to these folks coast to coast and out sort of West Coast, Nevada. I mean, we are in so much better shape than New York State. Let me just tell you, the investment we've made in our public health structure is really paying off right now. I mean, truly, we are breathing rarefied air, truly, compared to Nevada, Arizona, clients in California. So take some heart in that as well. So I guess just to the extent you can meter out what's working for you in the information, really give it a conscious thought about limiting it, because there's just too much of it right now. So I pulled this one off the Times yesterday, or my folks did for me. This is just to show you the New York Times interactive maps are great. I actually like them a little bit better than Hopkins. And that's not just because it's Hopkins, but the New York Times maps, you can do it by state, by country. You can get around the world. This map looks very different than it did in March and April. Things, you know, March and April were around the coasts, and things are alarmingly moving into, you know, the center of the country. I think 17 states posted yesterday record-breaking numbers, largely, you know, in areas where there aren't very many people. So the percentage getting it looks very high, but still concerning numbers. So again, the New York Times interactive maps have been great. So here is the 8-month look, okay? And I want everyone to stop using the word wave, okay? A wave, to me anyway, invokes this image of an ocean wave that you stand in and it comes at you. You have no control over it, right? This isn't a wave. We have control of it. This is a curve that reflects choices, that reflects societal choices, right? So this is just a curve. So I just want to stop calling it a wave. And there's a couple bumps in this curve. And things are creeping back up again. In my company, we prepare dashboards for multinationals operating, you know, overseas and in the States, and things are creeping up slowly, tenths, you know, double tenths of a percentage point in percent positivity. And we've got to start heading it off because people are coming indoors, and we expect with the holidays, people are going to gather. okay? So we just want to be mindful. I pulled the New York State list. You can see it. There's a tiny blip. Huge changes, 14-day changes, okay? But when you're bumping around a low number, right, a slight increase is going to look huge, as you see there, but it's slowly ticking up, okay? So we're going to pay attention to this very closely, okay? We've got some great leadership in New York who just put on an executive order last week. I've had some high-level talks with folks at DOH, and they're hedging their bets. So they put out red, orange, and yellow zones. They're going to do it. They're going to identify clusters, okay? Because this is what's going to happen over the next, all the models say this is going to be endemic around the world for the next 2 or 3 years. We're just going to have these outbreaks, right? So how do you deal with outbreaks? When you can get percent positivity in the general population below 2%, 3%, what are you going to do with the pop-ups, okay? And so they've outlined what they're going to do with the pop-ups, but they haven't told us, and maybe they can't. I've sort of been going around and around in my head. Maybe they can't tell us that what is going to trigger a red action, an orange action, or a yellow action. And this is going to go by zip code, okay? The last phone call I had with some higher ups, they said maybe around 3% was where they were going to start really paying attention and having a good look. But there wasn't clear guidance on what was going to happen in New York State based on these zones. It was very clear what's going to happen in the zone, but what are you traveling to and from the zone? Like, are you welcome to work if you come from one of those zones but work in a different zone? So this is sort of to be continued, but really is the beginning of the framework of what's going to happen when we're trying to manage pop-up clusters. So I wanted to address first right now transmission. So things have definitely morphed since we talked in April. Many routes of transmission for virus. The fomite route we definitely think is less. That's the dirty surface to hand to eyes. We absolutely need to wash our hands. It's the cornerstone of public health. It's definitely, a decent size proportion for SARS-CoV-1. We thought it was maybe less than 10%, right around there. Not anything to sneeze at, no pun intended. So we need to keep things clean. But we're really understanding the airborne route now, okay? And make no mistake, this is there's an airborne transmission route. And I understand that word sort of, induces panic in people, right? It's airborne. But I just want to demystify the word airborne a little bit, okay? And our own Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have not done a very good job of this. And there's some of my fabulous colleagues trained with them, whatever, but that part of the CDC website is a hot mess right now. I've got some slides to show what's going on, but there's an unfortunate conversation going on in the infectious disease community right now about airborne transmission. They have lumped things. They're working with 1940s, 1950s dogma about large droplets and small droplets, okay? It's 2020. We have particle physics. We understand aerosols. We have complex flow visualization and computational fluid dynamics. We understand that there is a range of particles somewhere in between large droplets and small droplets that people emit when they breathe, talk, cough, sneeze, okay? And large droplets, 50 microns, 40 microns, are gonna drop, probably within, 6 feet. Some of those larger droplets, maybe closer to 10 microns, somewhere in there, are gonna dry up. On their way to falling, they're gonna dry up, depending on temperature and humidity and airflow patterns. They're going to dry up and then get carried away, okay? And they're not going to settle out, okay? So it's not just every single large droplet falls. In that range of particles that you emit when you breathe, cough, sneeze, talk, whatever, are some very small ones, 10 microns, 5 microns, that are just going to go and remain aloft, depending, again, on temperature and humidity, how quickly they dry up, which is why seasonal flu is seasonal. It likes it cool and dry, right? So this range of particles is going to take a range of time and distance to dry up or settle, okay? And so when everyone hears airborne, they think measles, right? That it's going to get into the ventilation system and be transported and whatever. Our contact tracing isn't supporting that argument right now. We don't have like large outbreaks from room to room or floor to floor in the big buildings in New York City and whatever. But this doesn't mean that in a room, 1,000 square foot room, 500 square foot room, that it can't go from one side of the room to the other more than 6 feet, okay? So just sort of want to demystify that. We have wonderful particle physicists in Boston who have done a whole bunch of FlowViz, and they've helped us understand that droplets, again, in that small micronuclei, 5 micron, depending upon temperature and humidity and airflow patterns, can go 27 feet, right? Like way further than we thought, okay? So, you know, this isn't something to be afraid of. It's just something to understand, which is why everybody should be wearing a mask all the time inside. And it's something to recognize and something to deal with, okay? Unfortunately, a couple weekends ago, the CDC sort of red is new, green was old, but they like between Friday and Monday, and we have a really good rumor mill, and I'm sure I will eventually find out what happened, but they posted new comment that all of us scientists have known forever. We've been waiting for them to do it, that says, hey, this stuff is airborne, okay? And they posted it late on Friday the 18th. I bet it was some frustrated public health worker who said, I'm just gonna do this. And then they took it down on the 21st, that Monday morning, and said a draft version of the proposed changes to these recommendations was posted in error to the agency's official website. CDC is currently updating its recommendations regarding airborne transmission, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, it's frustrating. There's so many super bright, dedicated folks down there, and they're just hamstringed with, I don't know what pedantic process, but today, on October 5th, it has a bold statement: COVID-19 can sometimes be spread by airborne transmission. And this is what we needed to shore up everybody wearing a mask, right? So there's still, unfortunately, some parts of the country and some folks right around here that are anti-maskers, right? And it's funny from a historical perspective. If you look at some of the news headlines from 1918, they don't look any different. They were having the same mask conversation then, right? So human nature is a funny, probably fairly predictable thing. So hopefully that sort of demystifies the word airborne, talks everyone back from the ledge that it's not anything that we don't understand, and it's not anything that we can't control, but it's absolutely something we need to recognize and be aware of and address. So I don't know if you were tuned in April. We had the hierarchy of controls up there. This universally is what environmental health and safety people use to control any kind of hazard: chemical, physical, and biological. And we knew this would work, okay? We brainstormed all the controls that fit into each bucket, okay, for whatever scenario we're in: a school, a bank, a chemical processing plant, whatever was gonna work. It kind of fit in one of these buckets, and we had all good long think about what was gonna work. And we've got good evidence that all these controls are working. So there's sort of this, my colleagues at Harvard have been putting out this Swiss cheese concept, right? So if the virus gets past one hole, dang, it's likely to meet some other control, right? So because it's not going to surpass all of them, one of them is going to work. That's why we've got to layer on these protections. And so elimination for sure, making sure that everyone is really paying attention to filling out their forms every morning and being super conscious of how they feel and, can work through, staying home when they don't feel well, and again, a reminder, we can't be ignoring symptoms right now. A lot's been done around campus for engineering controls, and ventilation improvements. You'll see the kids with barriers and kids' rooms with barriers. A lot of standalone HEPA units. We spec'd out the clean air delivery rates on those, and so those have been really great. We're thinking a lot about administrative controls, like those are right in your face. Like, this is what we're doing now. We're walking this way, not that way. We're not eating lunch together, etc. We're going to wash our hands. We're cleaning the campus more than we ever have. And then finally, the PPE, the universal masking. I mean, the reports around campus are that the kids are doing really great. In even the little munchkins, which we weren't, they just put their masks on and go. So kudos to them. So, we know the protective measures are working. Face coverings absolutely work when they're used properly. For sure, we have fantastic evidence against large droplets. The social distancing is absolutely working. There's been a shift in the relative importance of the surface contamination. The Japanese folks, this is great for this group. The Japanese folks have adopted this their health folks, this new model that pushes the 3 C's. So we've got the 5 C's, they've got the 3 C's, which is to avoid closed spaces, crowds, and to minimize contact. And so, those things alone definitely fit into the protective measures. So maybe we can put that into our rubric. I still have some folks that don't think masks work. The evidence could not be more clear. So my Asia Pacific clients, so Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, everyone that masked up early. I mean, they heard about this in December and Jan. They're like, oh, here we go again. I mean, it was absolutely no big deal, de rigueur. They just put their masks on. And there you go. You can look at the death rates for these countries in the green, who didn't mask up early, and then the ones that masked up pretty quick within 15 days or in a month, very low death rates per million people. Okay, so I don't know what, in a population level, for sure, we've got the evidence. There's a bunch of morbidity and mortality weekly reports that CDC puts out of clusters and case studies. There's case studies with, hairdressers who were both infected, but everyone was wearing masks. They were wearing masks. All their 100+ clients were wearing different kinds of masks. No transmission. So the evidence that these masks work is unequivocal. The other interesting thing too, so the party line has been that masks protect everyone around you. But Gandhi and her group have proposed the following, and I think we'll see it. I think we have seen it in antibody titers, which is that the mask is also protecting the wearer, okay? Just enough, right? So a cloth mask isn't proper, in my world, respiratory protection, personal protective equipment. I can't fit test it. I can't give you a protection factor like I can for an N95 or an elastomeric or a half mask or a full face shield, face mask. But the thought is, and it's panning out, we'll know in probably 6 months or a year, that wearing the mask is reducing the viral load that someone will inhale just enough to do 2 things. One, create an antibody response. And if you do get sick, lowering the severity of it because you got a lower dose, okay? So in essence, the masks are serving as a little bit of a poor man's vaccine, okay? So dual purpose for the masks, super important to think about. So if we think about, we move away from transmission and controls and just get in here a little bit on testing. This is the FDA has really been keeping their website really tip top. And they've been holding weekly town halls. And let me tell you, reality TV has nothing on these town halls. I mean, people are frustrated, like senior scientists, like literally yelling at each other. I mean, it's been fascinating to listen to, but they're productive and they get around to civility again. But they've outlined these testing. There's a link there. I can send that to anyone that's keen. There's 3 basic kinds of tests. The first 2 are diagnostic. They're going to tell us if you have it. The last kind, antibody testing, so that's molecular testing for the virus itself. You can test for antigen, which are the proteins integral or to the virus. They'll tell you if you are actively infected, versus the antibody test, which kind of is a look back. That's not a diagnostic test. It's sort of like you were either sick, you got it, you didn't even know you had it, you're asymptomatic, or again, you were wearing a mask and you got a small enough dose to mount some kind of immune response. Safe to say, between the two kinds of diagnostic testing that we have, molecular testing and antigen testing, there are many flavors, okay? Nasal, nasopharyngeal, I mean, they'll tickle your brain, throat swabs, saliva, you name it, okay? And then there's various routes. There's rapid testing for both, and then there's proper, send to a highly complex lab diagnosis for both, okay? Both of them, so early on, we had serious testing issues, and I still think we have some testing deficits, okay? But again, we are in rarefied space here in New York State, and that our testing is probably one of the better, even though it still feels a little delayed, still frustrating. I can tell you, relatively speaking, we're in better shape than most, okay? What happens when you start testing more people, more asymptomatic people, okay, because think back to Feb, March, and April. The only people getting tested were symptomatic. They were pretty much clearly sick, right? But in order to control these outbreaks, we're going to have to start testing more asymptomatic people. And that does something very interesting to our tests. These tests, whether they're for the virus or for the proteins, the antigens, are very specific, okay? They're looking for SARS-CoV-2 virus and SARS-CoV-2 proteins, okay? Some of them have varying sensitivities. The one that gets sent out to a lab definitely have better sensitivities than the rapid ones. But what happens when you start testing a group of people where the prevalence of the virus is low, okay, your pre-test probability of being sick is low, the value of the test goes down, right? You're gonna start seeing more false positives. So we call it the positive predictive value. So the positive predictive value is the probability that someone actually has the disease if they get a positive test. So you're gonna start hearing, oh my God, there's false positives. That's okay, right? As we start testing more people, most of these false positives are just gonna come in the lab. These dimers, and the primers, they just start interacting with each other. We're gonna start seeing 2% false positives, 3%. It's gonna make headlines. It's gonna be a splash. And I'm telling you not to worry about it. It's something that's it's gonna happen. On the rapid tests, we just do another rapid test. It takes another 20 minutes. Bob's your uncle, right? And so without any symptomatic, without any symptoms, without an epidemiologic link to exposure, the false positive, I think, is going to be the thing that's going to concern folks, right? Because they're almost as disruptive as a false negative, definitely less consequences or fewer consequences. But I think that that's what we're going to hear in testing. I think early next year, we're going to start seeing different kinds of testing, right? So most people are familiar with you can go get tested for the virus. The antigen testing, and Michael Minna at the School of Public Health has been like screaming at the top of his lungs on any rooftop that he can get on top of, and I don't disagree with him at all. I just want to walk you through this chart. So the PCR test for the virus is very sensitive, okay? It can detect very low viral loads, which may actually be a problem, I have to say, versus something that's less sensitive like the antigen, which is really only going to peak when you're actively infected. If you can deploy a less sensitive test more often at $5 a piece in your bathroom without an analyzer, we may catch more people. Actually, we will catch more infectious people than $150 or $200 PCR viral test once a week, every other week, okay? So suffice to say, the antigen test that came out a couple weeks ago, the government just bought every single one of them. So it's not really publicly available at this point, but Q1, Q2 next year, you're going to see different kinds of testing. You're going to see different testing frequencies. You know, it's not one and done for a week or a month or whatever. Okay. So I'm hoping that this comes to bear, because this is going to be critical in, again, containing those clusters that are going to pop up. The other thing that's coming to, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, it's probably too dense, but it's, do we really want to understand if someone's infected or if someone's infectious, right? They're two different things. And as a society, we're going to have to figure this out pretty quick, or come this winter, there's going to be very many people left to work if we're quarantining. In some parts of the country, we're quarantining large groups of people, okay? So suffice to say, as the PCR test becomes more available, as we get more science, as we understand more about the virus, we're going to be able to tell you how infected you are, where you are in your course of infection, and if you are infectious. And so that's going to really help us understand who needs to sit out, okay, and keep everybody else safe, okay? So that's coming too. Antibodies. Huge questions on antibodies. And can we get reinfected? I don't have great answers here, okay? Here's what I do know, okay? The antibodies appear to taper off after 3 to 4 months. The circulating antibody titers are not permanent, okay? There's a CDC piece on this. It's being overinterpreted. People think, oh, I'm immune for 3 months. That's not really what they meant. It just meant that you shouldn't get retested within a 3-month period after you've been infected, okay? I don't know what antibody levels create immunity. And I don't know if the presence of it, any antibodies translates to any immunity, okay? But we do know for other beta coronaviruses, antibodies fade around 1 year. They sort of start tapering down. I should have put another bullet in here. I don't know what memory, we have memory cells in our immune system. So after circulating antibodies go away, we get memory for certain things, so that when we're challenged with that antigen again, or that virus again, excuse me, we can mount an immune response pretty quickly. I don't know if that's going to happen here or not. Can we get reinfected? Links closely with that antibody question. We have a couple dozen reports of documented cases of reinfection. How many undocumented? I don't know. We weren't doing enough testing in March and April to understand if people are reinfected, if it's a new infection or not this fall. There are 2 case reports clearly documenting reinfection, one in Hong Kong and one just this week in Nevada, only because they were identified with 2 genetically distinct strains, okay? So they were pretty much 2 virus, okay? So can you get reinfected? It's looking like it, okay? Again, can't let up the gas on our controls. Test availability is great here in New York State, as frustrating as it may seem in certain situations and scenarios. It's still better than most. Certainly contact your healthcare providers to gain access to those. A lot of the urgent care centers have them. The Department of Health is running clinics. The New York State website for them is to wherever to get your test by county is very well developed as well. This is an interesting graphic, again, from the Times, who's doing a pretty good job of reporting science. So I'm happy. We're estimating about, and it's actually a little less than 70% of the testing that needs to get done to contain this virus and to contain the outbreaks is being done. So we still have room to be doing more testing. For sure, in the Northeast, we're doing much better. A lot of the academic research labs turned off their research, like the Broad Institute and very large highly qualified individuals just turned off their research altruistically and turned to doing clinical sampling, which was amazing. So in the Northeast, we're doing pretty good. Not so much in the bread belt, doing a little bit better on the West Coast. So new developments in testing, looking at multi-flu panels, or panels that include the flu and all the coronaviruses. So you can go get a flu swab for flu A, flu B, I don't know how 10 or 11 other coronaviruses. We just need to slide in SARS-CoV-2 into this. Like SARS-CoV-2 just can't be some super special separate thing. From a public health standpoint, I'd love to have one screen. Employers are going to have trouble with that because they've only gotten relief to test folks for SARS-CoV-2. So somebody way smarter than me has got to figure out all that stuff. On a population level, you know, some of our academic clients and some of our departments of public works have been doing sewage sampling to understand, you know, population prevalence, which is interesting. In a more controlled setting, like a dorm or whatever, you can go back and do follow-up testing, individual diagnostic testing, which is kind of cool. We are very closely following exhaled breath condensate for our entertainment clients. Television and movie production has this zone system, and we're helping them set up zones to test people every day, every night, and they get a pass for the next day. And this exhaled breath condensate would be the bomb. So when you exhale enough virions that they can detect them, right? So they gotta perfect this. So this will be coming next year, I suspect. And then I love this one. We're calling it the lab test. There are trained dogs in Scandinavia that they have trained to sniff out SARS-CoV-2. And let me tell you, it's pretty good. So they swab your neck, they take the dogs back, they sniff it out, and then if the dogs say you're positive, they go back, you get a proper rapid test, 98% accuracy. And I don't doubt it. I mean, we've trained dogs to smell cancer and everything. So love this one. Absolutely love this one. Not sure most of the public would buy into it, but it's another kind of lab test. So where are we at with the vaccine? I don't want to speak too much longer, but you know, it's, I think one of the questions, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, are we going to have a vaccine by the end of the year? The answer is no. So just being totally realistic with you, there's trust. We need time to get to a place of trust. You know, questions sort of, is this going too fast? Will it be effective? Will it be safe? There are some huge ethical issues associated with vaccine development right now, especially during a pandemic. You know, think of this scenario. So you're running a trial, you're J&J, you're running a trial, half the people get the vaccine, half the people get placebo. So in the course of normal trials, if there's clear evidence that the vaccine or the drug or whatever therapy you've got is working, you stop it and give the placebo group the treatment, okay? But will that compromise the development of the other vaccines that are going on? So the FDA has said it's got to be at least 50% protective, right? But if you stop a trial at 51%, you tell the placebo group they got it, is that compromising the trial over here that was running? We don't know. Maybe that one was going to be 70% effective, right? So there's huge issues associated with running so many trials at once. As far as is this going too fast? And I am not, vaccines are, you know, right at the edge of my knowledge. I don't want to overspeak, but I was listening to Barry Bloom last week, and this is his area of expertise. And he came at this, you know, so we've had the sequence for this since, you know, early mid-Jan for this virus. So there was sort of like this 9 months to a year of sequencing that just got short-circuited. We just, you know, mumps is the fastest we've ever gotten a vaccine. That was 4 years. We just short-circuited a whole year of work, essentially. So, you know, some of the strategies to combine phases will work, but there's going to be gates that people have to pass. And I want to just make sure that we're all on the same page about herd immunity. So you can get herd immunity, okay, which is that just enough people are immune, right, so that you don't cause an outbreak in the rest of the people. And you get there either through being sick or being vaccinated, okay? And absolutely by no means do we want to get more people sick to get to herd immunity, because it won't happen. But the vaccine is going to be critical in getting us to herd immunity in the areas where we need it the most. And so that's going to be, you know, essential workers, healthcare folks, and the most vulnerable, nursing homes and things like that. So where are we on immunity? Even in New York State, we're only at 33% immune. We need about 70+%. For measles, you need 95% of the people to have immunity, not to cause an outbreak, and the remaining 5%. But interestingly, the antibody studies that are getting done in decent sized populations are telling us that we have undercounted the number of cases, probably by about 10 times. Okay, so this is huge. So again, not a lot of people got tested in Jan, Feb, March, April, unless they were actively sick. But the antibody studies are telling us that we have way undercounted the number of cases. So right now there's, again, last week there was 165 vaccine candidates around the world, many in preclinical testing, you know, most of them in the earlier phases. They're starting to combine phases 1 and 2. None have been approved. And, you know, in the news this week, some are stopping for this, that, and the other thing. But as these gates get passed, you know, the FDA is under serious scrutiny worldwide. I mean, people look worldwide to our federal agency and our regulators to say this is safe. Okay. And so they've combined phases. They came out a couple of weeks ago with their vaccine approval process. They've issued new guidance for the emergency use of these things. So we're just going to have to wait. I think when they roll them out, there's lots of committees talking about how to roll them out. The CDC has a very well-developed page. It's right here, the vaccine distribution strategy. I think it's very well thought out. There's 2 phases to one, which are, you know, either folks at high risk or highly vulnerable that are going to get it first. And that's going to take many months. So that phase 1 rollout will be Q1, 2, 3 next year. And then, you know, Q3, Q4 late next year, they might start getting to, you know, non-essential folks. Kids will absolutely be last. So under 18, we do not give new vaccinations to kids without way more than what's going on here. So kids will absolutely be last. But this is right up on the CDC website. You can kind of go look at it and see what's all involved in there. But I did want to wrap up and just talk a little bit. And this is funny because I was telling Dave and Elizabeth that this is a little out of my comfort zone. Just talk about the mental health piece to all of this, okay? Because I'm going a little bonkers, right? And so we've got to think, we got to step back and think holistically about how we're going to get through this. Maybe another 10 months of this, okay? But thinking about how to gather, making sure that we're taking care of our bodies, we're taking care of our communities by getting our flu vaccines, making sure we are not letting up the gas on all the controls that we know work. So mask wearing and hand washing and social distancing. And then thinking of ways to cope with stress. I mean, I shared with Dave the other day that during some of these interminable Zoom calls, I've been knitting again, right? I mean, so everybody's getting a hat for Christmas. So whatever it is for you, it's worth taking time to really sort of work through that, okay? The National Institutes of Mental Health put together this great rubric. And again, I started telling you, just take some breaks from the news or figure out what news source is going to work for you. Taking time to unwind, setting goals and priorities for yourself and your family, taking care of your body, making sure you're getting your flu shots, connecting with others in meaningful ways, and focusing on the facts, right? So for me, that meant getting off of social media. The flu clinics, Nurse Christine gave me these dates. There's October 22 and 24. There's some opportunities for the community at large, as well as employees and students as well. I just want to spend one more minute on holidays and gatherings. You know, I'll just share with you, my mother's turning 80 in 2 weeks, and we had this big party plan, and we were going to see, like, we've been planning this for like 2 years. Old family friends were going to come. I mean, it's devastating. And I think everybody has one of these stories, right? So everybody's looking at me like, can we do this? And for like literally the last I don't know, 5 months. It's been in my head. Can we, can't we, can we, can't we? Okay, if we don't take, you know, friends from this state, or we don't do this, or we meet outside, or I'm contorting myself into a pretzel and knowing full well that we cannot get a whole bunch of 80-year-old people together, right? And yet I'm still trying to figure it out, right? Because it's just such a huge loss. But I know that it's not a great idea. And I'll just share one other story, which is I have a client who is just an absolute hoot. He's a Catholic priest, and he's responsible for about 20,000 people. And we're in an interminable Zoom meeting, 10 people, everyone was talking, nothing was getting, you know, settled. And in the middle of the conversation, Father said, stop. Everybody just stop talking. And he said, Shannon, and he posed this question that was like mind altering for me, because I'm in the world of limit liability, reduce cases, manage risk, whatever. He said, Shannon, what's the most loving thing we can do for our community right now? I was like, wow, that's the question we need to be answering. And I'm a scientist. I deal black and white. But right now, loving your community and your family, close and far, might mean skipping Thanksgiving and Christmas and Hanukkah. Like, that might be the most loving thing to do. So I just am challenging you, as you want to get out, you want to gather, you want to meet. And I know some people had maybe missed last Christmas. Ask yourself, is this a truly the most loving thing to do? And I'll leave it at that, okay? Because the answer is different for everyone. The circumstances are different. There's, you know, complicated situation, maybe even end of life kinds of thing. I mean, horrible things, right, that we're trying to parse. The risk factors, outdoor is definitely better than indoor. Minimizing duration, minimizing the number of people, really thinking about community levels of COVID wherever you are. This came from the CDC website, but I want to make sure you're all aware, and Dave said they're going to post, but as people travel, there's serious travel restrictions coming back into New York State. You may have to quarantine for 14 days, and make no mistake, I have people traveling, and the DOH meets you at the jetway and takes your name and makes you check in, right? So it's not like you're sneaking through the airport, whatever. So make sure you're aware of travel restrictions, thinking about personal risk factors, both for you and the people you're going to meet. And I'll tell you, as disappointed as I am, as the airborne bits of the CDC website, their travel guidance is great. It really is very well developed. So I'm just going to stop talking so I can take some questions. I just want to thank my team members at Colden. Susan Reynolds and Chrissy Walsh are certified industrial hygienists. They're doing a phenomenal job, just rapid pace of absorbing information and getting it out. And Haley McDougall is one of our junior folks who's just crackerjack. So thank you to them.
Well, thank you, Shannon. That's incredibly informative, and the personal stories and your last story has a pretty strong tie-in with what we're trying to accomplish at MPH, and it's really challenging. You know, we get it. We miss a lot of these things, but that's a pretty core question. What can we, you know, what's the most loving thing we can do for our community? That really hits home. Because we're grateful for the time you're giving us, I want to jump right to some questions that have been posed beforehand, and I want to give folks a heads up. If you've got a question, send it along to through the chat function. But you've already answered at least one question during your chat with us, Shannon. Here's another one. Will this vaccine be similar to the flu vaccine, where a new batch will need to be produced annually, and we will all need to receive a new vaccination along with our flu shot?
Again, I'm not a vaccine expert. Everything I'm hearing is saying probably yes. Okay. That's what I'm hearing. I don't know. We don't know how good the memory cells are going to be for this type of beta coronavirus, but the other ones, the immunity does wane, so it may wash out that way. Yeah.
Okay. But we didn't put any limitations on the questions, so some of them may be followed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's another one. I guess this is, in your opinion, is air travel safe with proper PPE and distancing?
The answer is yes, but I would still minimize it. I would still ask myself the question, do I need to go? So my folks are considered as certified industrial hygienists. They're considered essential workers. We're going out doing audits. Again, we got to place this hazard in the rubric of all other hazards and carcinogens and everything else we're facing. So we've been traveling this whole year, and we've not had a case, and we've been heading right into hot zones and wildfires and every other manner of things, and we've not had a case. There are some airlines that are doing a little bit of a better job at not selling the middle seat. Tips along those lines. So I'm having my folks book direct routes whenever possible to minimize hops inside of the airports themselves. The airplanes are probably better off than the airports, right? I don't know, the ventilation, the density is certainly going to be up around the holidays. So traveling off hours, trying to take direct flights, those types of things. The airlines are requiring very specific types of face coverings. So you want to check that before you go. They're at least requiring the surgical masks, which are the spun bound or the melt bone polypropylene. My folks have been traveling with N95s. We've always had them. And we're wearing a face mask over the valve so that we can cover those. So that's, and some eye protection. So that's how our folks have been traveling, and then trying to minimize any eating, which is hard on a long flight, but yeah. Okay,
thank you. This question, I know you addressed it and you answered it, but it may be worth just repeating because there's a lot sort of out there in the airwaves. What more, if anything, do we know about COVID-19 antibodies? How long does immunity last once you've been confirmed to have the virus? And that question assumes that there is immunity, but how long,
It's looking short-lived. I mean, so it's not this, this step function of immunity, right? There's a slow tapering off after several months. So CDC has felt comfortable in saying the titers, if you had, and it depends upon if you had a raging case or just a little bit. But excuse me, it looks like it's several months, 3, 4, 5 months.
Okay. Has anything surprised you since your April presentation in terms of the virus and or our response to it? You addressed some of this as well, but
I'm telling you, it's going to take me years to digest. And I said this to you before, Dave, digest the human component of this. Just sort of, why did people make those decisions? What do people value? I mean, I'm a consultant. I just take the tasks as they come. And let me tell you, some of them, I obviously can't share a lot of them, but it's just sort of, really? You want me to do that? And so the human piece of what people value has been fascinating. What surprised me about the virus, I think a lot at a very deep scientific level, as an epidemiologist, really the thing that's fascinating me the most is that a lot of people are infected, but not transmitting. The transmitting is actually coming from a very small percentage of people. So most of the spreading events are actually super spreading events. Most people that get sick don't transmit outside of the home, rather. So that's an interesting concept. It's totally different from measles and tuberculosis and whatnot.
All right. Is COVID-19, can COVID-19 be eradicated or will it be with us forever and need to be managed?
Yeah, so issues to solve, problems to solve versus issues to manage. So I think it's going to be with us. I think, again, the current models say it will be endemic for the next 2 or 3 years around the world until we can truly get herd immunity through vaccination. I think these zoonotic spillover events are going to keep happening, right? So every 7, 8 years, MERS, SARS-CoV-1, like these things are, this is not the last one. And look at the Asia Pacific, right? So they got it, right? They all masked up early and they just moved on. So maybe not to terrify anyone, but maybe the next one will just be a little bit more mentally prepared to just deal with this. But I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Hopefully not. It won't be with us forever.
Okay. Well, I was able to slip in one of my questions there, Shannon, and I've addressed all of the questions that have been asked. We've got 4 minutes, 41 people on the line. If anyone wants to take themselves off mute and make a comment, ask a question, please feel free to do that.
I just want to say thank you so much, Shannon, for sharing all of this information. It's really an incredible blessing, if you will, to be able to have an expert like you be local, but also be so tapped into what's happening and what precautions we can take. And I thank you.
Yeah, happy to help. Happy to help for sure. Dave and I were laughing that most boards don't actually look for epidemiologists. They want accountants and lawyers and, it's like the start of a bad joke, but that's okay. Happy to participate.
Yeah, and I think Paula's comments are probably resonating with all of us. Any other thoughts, comments, questions here? Oh, let's see. So Natalie Rousseau, thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise. I was curious locally why there is that 2-week reporting period and how that impacts our data regarding local transmission.
Nellie, I'm not sure why we look at a 14-day average. Is that the question? I'm not sure about that.
Sorry, yes. Sorry, I was trying to find the mute button. Yes, and sort of not why like a moving 2-week window. So at least at the university, right, it's sort of like this 2 weeks and then the next 2 weeks and how that impacts our sort of understanding of the disease locally.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I totally understand your question, but we look at 14-day moving averages, 7-day moving averages, and 3-day moving averages, and sort of gauge different actions based on them. And, 3-day moving average is pretty tight, especially when it's taking 2 or 3 days now, even still for some test results to come back. And there's reasons to look at a shorter window of time. What the average should be moving along. So today's average on Wednesday should be Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, and tomorrow's average should drop off Monday and pick up Thursday. So we're looking at moving averages. So I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. That's okay. I may have asked the wrong question.
Okay, I'm tested using the upstate saliva test as part of group surveillance. How reliable is that testing?
It's great. It's been working really well. It's been really, really great. Yep. That's a PCR test, very sensitive.
Okay.
They've been getting pretty good turnaround. Yeah, but that's a perfect example of an academic lab, altruistically, or I don't know financially how well it was driven or what the economics work out, but turning off academic research and turning themselves into, getting their CLIA waiver to operate as a clinical lab, which is precisely what should have happened in February with the stroke of a pen, in my opinion, but it didn't happen.
Okay. Well, I think I don't see any new questions coming in through the chat function. And Shannon, conservatively, you've given us probably 3 to 4 hours of your time and expertise today alone. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We're so fortunate to have you in our corner.
Thanks.
All right, folks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shannon.
All righty. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Shannon, thank you again on behalf of a grateful community. We appreciate it.
Thank
Great.
you so
Have a good
much.
week, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.